Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Steal My HUE Lights. Enjoy your new, earlier wake-up time. Preface, this story wrapped up last night. Background, I was dating a guy, boyfriend, long distance last summer, and things were going pretty well. I was in DC and boyfriend was in Chicago. I was about to move to Spain temporarily for a really cool opportunity, and boyfriend and I discussed that after I returned to the US, I would move to Chicago and we'd go from being long distance to a normal couple. My lease was going to end right as I was going to move to Spain. Instead of finding a way to store all my things for a year and then subsequently move them to Chicago, I figured that this was a perfect time to downsize. I got rid of a lot of clothing, sold my furniture, and just decided to keep some essentials, sentimental items, and portable expensive electronics. I only brought the essentials to Spain, whatever would fit in my luggage, and boyfriend offered to store my sentimental items and electronics. I didn't mind him borrowing the electronics while I was gone, game console and games, JBL speaker, and my HUE lights, and he installed the HUE lights in his condo. I visited him for a week and a half right before moving to Spain, and we had a little bit of tension and the visit was a little bit rocky. I thought we were going to be able to work through things and recover, but right as I moved to Spain, boyfriend ghosts me for a month and then breaks up with me over a text message. We briefly text about how I can get my belongings back as well as the $400,000 he owes me. I'm depressed and lacking a support group in Spain, coupled with the language barrier, and I decide to return to the US sooner than anticipated, and I actually end up moving to Chicago anyways because I was over DC and got a nice job offer in Chicago. Boyfriend returns my sentimental items on his own accord but doesn't return my electronics other than my game console. I tried to contact him, but he blocked my number, Instagram, WhatsApp, Venmo, and Splitwise. I tried approaching him in person the couple of times I bumped into him and asked him if we could discuss my electronics and the money he owes me, and he completely blows me off and is extremely rude. Obviously, I conclude that he has no intention to return my electronics or pay me back the money he owes me, and I'm angry. I try to be patient and diplomatic and attempt to talk to him a few more times whenever I bumped into him, but he was acting the same. I finally write him an email saying, "Don't worry about the money you owe me, just please return my things," and gave my roommate his phone number so that they could coordinate. He finally responds to my roommate and says that he'll send someone over the weekend to return my things. Yay! When the person dropped off my things, they only brought the games and speaker. Boyfriend kept my HUE lights. I run into him once more and ask boyfriend him when I could get my HUE lights back. He shrugs. I asked him if he planned on returning them. He shrugs again. I ask him point blank if he was stealing them from me, and he says, "I guess you could call it that." I finally give up, and decide to order new HUE lights and cut my losses. The revenge, when I was setting up my new HUE lights, I noticed that I was still connected to my prior pair that my boyfriend had stolen and that some of them were even on. I think it's a glitch or something and turn them off and don't think anything about it, but then they came back on. I was confused and curious, so I turned them off again. A few seconds later, they came back on. I suddenly realized that I was still connected and had just shut off boyfriend's lights twice. I beam with excitement. I don't turn them off again because I don't want him to figure out what's going on. Boyfriend doesn't work until about noon and likes to sleep in until 11 a.m. He's also very sensitive to light when he sleeps, so much so that he has blackout curtains so that he can sleep in that long. I personally wake up at 7 a.m. to go to work. So for the last couple of weeks, I've made a habit of turning boyfriend's light on at the same time that I wake up and watching them go off a few minutes later, giving me the sweet satisfaction that I'm disturbing his sleep in the morning. I don't think I've ever been so happy to wake up in the morning. I do this for a couple of weeks until he reaches out to my roommate and finally returns my lights last night. I suppose he thought they were defective or something. Obviously, I didn't post while I was enacting my petty revenge as I didn't want my fun to be cut short. But now that my lights have been returned, I'm posting. For just a tad bit more petty revenge, I hope he finds this post, it would be the icing on the cake. I want him to know it was me. The next one is titled, Evict ME? In Russia, tenant evicts you. Couple renting a 2-bedroom subletted room to me month to month. Mentioned in the interview that I had done legal work in a housing clinic, this is important later. Started off great. Didn't talk to them much, just worked, came home and loafed in my room. Literally used the living room once. Cleaned all dishes immediately after use. I am confident that I am a model tenant, all my prior roommates say so. This kind of confidence proves very useful when it turns out you are living with gaslighting nutbags. They slowly started losing it about every little thing. Forgot to flush the toilet once. They threw it in my face in every argument for the rest of my tenancy. Watched Walking Dead with my brother, like 6 to 8 p.m. at reasonable volume. They lost it about noise and advance notice for guests, despite no prior discussion of notice. They accused me of stealing their frozen goods. One time, I cooked an entire meal, while girlfriend was in the living room watching a movie with her shoulders hiked up so high they might have been earrings. I ignored it, until I had to take my meal on leave, and couldn't remember whether the light had been on when I entered. I already knew I was ducked. I guessed that it had been off, so I turned it back off. She charged at me screaming, "Excuse me?" I literally hid behind my bowl of spaghetti marinara. We locked eyes in silence as she huffed and puffed like a tapatio pooper. "You want the lights on?" "Yes." Asterisk flick. Asterisk asterisk leaves in silence. Asterisk these complaints were all accompanied with F-bombs and personal attacks. I honestly expected more integrity from a lawyer working at XYZ, can't fix stupid, and always assumed bad faith on my part. Disputes were only ever communicated over text, even when I asked for verbal discussion as a more human medium. It was clear to me that undiagnosed mental struggles were at play. I'd guess narcissism for him, anxiety disorder for her. I'd always try to lower the decibel, to find something I could accept responsibility for even when there wasn't anything, but emphasized that I'd really appreciate more manners, and that roommate situations can really just fly off the handle and suck for everyone if people aren't careful about how they communicate. So can you please find a more constructive way to communicate, such as XYZ, etc. I know this from experience, again, housing clinic. The last time, I explained that they clearly struggle with confrontation, whereas I live and work in it, and this is going to be worse for them than me if we flip the switch they are trying to flip. Nothing doing. Finally, one day, my bestie came over. To be nice, we watched TV shows, but in my room. Quietly, with the laptop's native speakers. We fell asleep on accident around 11 p.m. on a Friday. The next day we got dim sum. Dropped off leftovers on the counter, didn't refrigerate it to avoid dehydrating it. Came back to a note saying, "This has been sitting out for 3 hours." Ignored it, grabbed the food, and headed out to go camping. Got a slough of texts saying that we had made raucous noise the night before and dropping F-bombs. Property manager told me they'd complained to her, but that she didn't care, it's a Friday. Finally I put my foot down a little more firmly, and said something like, "I never agreed to guest stuff, we made no noise, and I don't take orders from you. I have civil discussions. Let me know if you are available for one of those." Came back to an eviction notice on my door. Waves of what the ducks washed over me. These dumb ducks were so out of control that they waltzed as backwards into my literal court. The switch flips. I start finding constant, humiliating, and unfixable complaints to raise with them. The girlfriend had long hair. I found it in the microwave. I sent a pic to the group chat. Refrigerator, sent to the group chat. Toothbrush area, group chat. I said that this is ducking, unsanitary and disgusting, and a liability for landlords, and she needs to find a one-bedroom somewhere if she can't stop living like a pig. I honestly don't give a duck, and she has zero control over her hair, but well, welcome to getting harassed with unreasonable bullshit. In fact, they point this out, and I walk all over it. They try to have someone over to look at my room. I wait until the visitor arrives to announce my right to 48 hours notice. They stop spending any time outside their room at all. I start spending lots of time in the common area, cooking stinky fish and using the living room. They cut off my internet, which did throw me, until I realized I still had access to my old co-op's Xfinity wireless. Manager at this point lets slip that they've been going through subtenants like burner phones for the last 5 years. Finally, the last day of the eviction notice arrives, after several days of reminder texts. They come home to find a thoughtful letter explaining that our town passed a just cause eviction requirement *4 months ago *. True, can't write this crap, and they don't have one, so I am going no place. Moreover, the new law attaches treble damages and criminal liability for violations, also true, and I am going to give them the big black diddly. Heard boyfriend laugh out loud through the wall at flute pitch. At this point they stopped texting me at all, as the reality sunk in that they'd spent a month sending me buckets of jury porn like complete morons. I got a VM from a mediator, who told me 3 times in one call that they above all did not want me to sue them. Deleted it. Then, I kid you not, they literally moved out of the house. Stopped living there. And throughout all this, I've effectively compartmentalized this whole area of my life and I'm happily overachieving at my job, having planned all this out at the beginning of the month. Eventually my fellowship ended and I left of my own volition. Got a full deposit too. I never did sue because who has time for that, but I was happy to let the specter of a suit haunt those anxious sadists for years. To quote Cartman, "Don't duck me." The next one is titled, "Steal My iPod? Duck Your Laptop." A story from 2007. Imagine being in high school, back in the latter days of George Bush, and finally buying that iPod of your dreams. After saving up your allowance and the money you made around the neighborhood doing random butt work, and lifeguarding at the local pool. Yup, that was me. And I was that douchebag 14-year-old who would make sure you knew I had one of the better iPods, one that could play video. It was the latest Nano if I remember right. Simpler times. But every story needs an antagonist. My sister happened to find that role many times. We are very close now, but back then, it wasn't so rosy. She was a teenager as well and spent most of those years resenting me. If I had something nice, duck you for having that. I was quite protective of my precious iPod. She raised quite the shitstorm when my parents refused to buy her one. Your brother saved his money, we didn't pay for it, we are not stopping you from buying one too if you save your money. That was their attitude toward any luxury that as kids wanted, even up to that time when buying a first car was on the table. We each had to buy our own. It built character and taught responsibility. Well, that iPod goes missing one day at home when I knew damn well I had left it charging at the family computer. I left it unattended. My parents confirmed they did not touch it, and all eyes were on my sister. I'll jump ahead here. As it turned out, she had indeed taken it and had one of her friends temporarily store it until the heat was off of her. She knew my parents would essentially strip search her. After this unraveled, one of my buddies saw her with the iPod at school several days later. It was time for payback. Back then, I liked to think of myself as a bona fide hacker. That's right, I knew all about batch files and how to open command prompt. Don't ducking cross me. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Yeah, anyway, we don't talk about those dark days. But I actually did know enough to copy, paste some destructive commands into scripts, using del and reg delete commands and the like. In the days of Windows XP, this would essentially require reinstalling the OS. I also was aware of a program called bat2exe which could package your batch files and associated files it would call from the same directory into a normal X file. And you could pick an icon to slap on that X, if you had the ICO file on hand. It doesn't take a genius, because as much as I thought I was one, I wasn't, to devise a plan here. I put a script together with the worst crap I could muster, and gave it the Internet Explorer icon. This went on to my sister's computer, which was an old Pentium M laptop which barely had enough arse to load MySpace at the time. My hacker abilities allowed me to log into the administrator account by booting into safe mode or something and simply replacing the iExplorer.x main file with my science experiment. I believe I had it to where it actually opened the real Internet Explorer in parallel, so I could deny this more easily. Fast forward to that magical moment. She's home from color guard practice and is ready for an evening full of shitty webcam photos that use every mid-2000s effect ever created. But before she can upload them, disaster. The screen resolution goes tits up, and the color profile is 16 colors for some reason. Random pop-up messages every few seconds. Microsoft Windows has detected a giant idiot, please consider a system upgrade, and stuff like that. Your hard drive is jammed with peanut butter. Restart required. The whole script plays out and she's left with a paperweight until someone can get around to sorting it. Unfortunately, the computer guy in the family took quite a while to get around to it. My dad knew damn well that I had something to do with this, even if he didn't understand it fully. He made my sister apologize to me before I helped her with her laptop and made her buy me a new case for it, after she threw away the one I had to try and make it less identifiable. Well, that's the story, folks. I have a video from 8+ years ago of this script running in a virtual machine if anyone wants to see it. Hope 2021 is off to a decent start for you. The last one is titled, I Took Control of the Narrative of a Narcissistic Abuser. It's awesome. I won't get into the nasty details of the abuse itself, most people know somewhat how depraved and horrific narcissistic abusers are. My trauma and fear and homelessness drove me to crumple under his blackmailing during court when he was going to be convicted for an arrest in May. Stupid me thought that not testifying would earn his compassion? Gratitude? I was wrong. He's abused me so much more since then. I finally left 3 weeks ago, asked a friend with 2 decades experience practicing in DV law for a huge favor in representing me legally this time, and have begun my revenge. First, I reported him for unemployment fraud because he's been collecting while making $2,000 a month under the table and hosting an illegal tenant who covers his bills, and I had his own texts to prove it. He doesn't need the money to survive, he said himself he doesn't want a real job ever again. My state is quick to crack down on UI fraud. He'll have to pay it all back, be banned for 1 to 5 years and I believe be banned from other state services. He isn't disabled or incapable of work, he has COVID antibodies and a standing job offer for a remote tech company if he needs it. So, duck him for being fraudulent. Next, I reported him to the IRS for concealing around 15 to 20K a year in income the last 5 years. It's not huge, but it's definitely not nothing. He'll be audited and investigated and likely forced to repay the fraudulent refunds he's received plus claim that past income and pay taxes owed. I gave an anonymous tip to Crime Stoppers about his illicit purchasing of amphetamines, something I discovered just last month. I know what kind, how much, where from and where they're stored. Normally I don't give a duck about this stuff, but my attorney said showing a pattern of lawless behavior will help the case, especially with his past history of DUI and reckless driving. I reached out privately to the admins of a few groups he is active in and provided them copies of my hospital and injury reports, his pending charges and a handful of messages from other women who'd reached out to let me know they'd been his victim as well. I kept their names covered. I explained I didn't want to request any specific actions but thought it was best for admins to know since these are very niche groups where he finds his women. I've had encouraging responses so far. Most groups don't want to harbor sexual and violent abusers. I have compiled every single message, video and audio scrap of evidence I have from the last 2 years, subpoenaed my old job for the HR records where the abuse was first reported, and made a calendar plus 4.5 pages of incidents that have involved violence, sexual assault or threats. I have an appointment with the prosecutor next week to turn these in and reopen the criminal case from before. I've spoken to most of our mutual friends whom I knew first and deleted any that came from him. They'd already been spoon-fed an insane version of the truth. Instead, my friends have slowly been talking to people about things. It's been validating to have neutral parties turn into supportive ones. His mother threatened me over Facebook several times. I sent her copies of the photos of my injuries and the messages from other women, again, names protected, told her I'd include her in the restraining order if she bothered me again and blocked her. I reached out to his ex, whom he never told he had herpes, and informed her she needed to get tested. She never responded to me, but chewed him a new one for hiding that from her. I found that out when he messaged my Google Voice account pissed. I sent a laughing emoji and blocked him there too. I bought the domain that is his name and uploaded a single 10-second video clip where he looks me dead in the face and says, "You bruise real easily," after he'd beaten me. I may do more with it later, but for now it comes up as the third hit on his name and he can't do a thing about it, and he got upset when he found out because he wants to run his side hustle from his own website. I've got it for at least a year. Lastly, I filed civil charges in small claims court. I have evidence of multiple libel, defamation incidents plus proof they impacted my employment and social groups. He also evicted me illegally while I was COVID positive in May. I have a video where he called the police to ask how to make me leave and they told him the eviction laws since I was a resident of the apartment. He laughed and says he didn't really want me to go after they told him they can't remove a legal resident. Then he forced me out and withheld my possessions 2 weeks later. There's proof he knew the law and broke it. He's now being sued. I've taken the steps to obtain therapy and medication to help with the severe PTSD I've developed. I barely leave the house and I don't talk to people much. I've been a proper mess for a long time from all this, but I've had the same therapist since 2015 and she has offered to submit her own reports to the courts about my mental condition before and after this relationship. Before, I had no diagnosable conditions outside of my Asperger's. Now I have a few different things happening, and I'm not responding well to trauma therapy. She wants me to do an intensive program for 21 days but insurance won't cover it. She's offering her professional testimony that it's likely the only treatment option for me and the cost is likely to be ordered covered by him under my state's tort laws. His last abuse victim has also offered to give a statement or testimony if allowed and broke her radio silence to tell him that before blocking him again. My guess is of all the things on this list, that's the one getting to him most. She stayed quiet for 3 years after leaving, ghosted one day and left him wondering why. He feigned a lot of hurt feelings about it. Now he knows we've talked and she's my ally. I know this isn't as satisfying and delicious or immediately gratifying as some revenge stories, but I felt like I was able to enact a lot more justice, revenge than a lot of people get to under these circumstances. This person absolutely terrorized me and I'm not super okay, but I'm getting a little better every day. I enrolled for classes starting this month and finally got into a shared house with a friend after living in my car most of this year. Most of this revenge is actually just accountability being forced but in ways not directly related to the depravity he put me through. He's never had consequences for anything in his adult life and it's damaged a lot of people. I don't feel bad at all for taking charge of the outcome now. I gave him a chance to grow on his own and he detonated it. Now I let the truth have its way and move on, as rough as it is. Thanks for listening.